Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Luke Gibbons.
And this is Elizabeth Guzman Arroyo.
And you are listening to Colonized Minds podcast. What's going on, Elizabeth?
Well, I was kind of thinking about the article you actually emailed us this week from the Chronicle of Higher Ed. So I think that it's a really good article, and I think it's important for us to discuss it as an institution. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about that during the podcast today.
Yeah, I don't know if we have enough time to talk about everything in the article, but yeah, it was a really cool article. It looked at University of Missouri 1 year later after protests that went on campus last year, and then following that, a lot of listed demands that were coming out from different student groups, and they just recently had another racist or bias incident that took place on their campus. And the article is looking at how they've responded and how different that response is compared to last year. And I think it does a really good job of looking at kind of the difference between the way an organization or an institution is attempting to respond to address the question and how those things are being experienced by students who were the target of that aggression on a campus. We walk that fine line between what it is that the student wants, which is, I need you to address this individual action because this is what I see on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to the institutions, their response, which has to also be, how do we create an environment where those things don't happen? And I think the only way that you can do that is this is the thing, you are not going to prevent like racist, sexist, homophobic things from happening on a college campus. You're just not. Until you actually solve that problem in society.
Right.
Like it's simple math. Not really sure. No, but it's like this. It exists in the world. You are taking people from the world and you're putting them in an institution. So it makes sense that whatever is existing in that outside environment is going to now be in your environment. It's the idea of it's why you quarantine, right? When someone is sick, it exists out there. Unless you quarantine it, it's going to exist in here. But you can't do that. You can't quarantine. Right. You have to take people from the outside. So the point is, if you have racism, sexism, if you have those types of things that exist in society, you're going to have them at your institution to some degree. You just will. The issue is how you respond to that. Mm-hmm. If you create an environment where that's unacceptable, where it's inappropriate, and people realize that that's the case, two things happen. Those individual actions don't manifest.
Right.
Or those people, when they do that, they leave. Because this becomes an environment in which they are not comfortable. And I think as an institution, that may not necessarily be popular with everyone, but I think an institution can make that statement. I think an institution can say, you know what, this is the type of institution that we are. This is what we stand for. These are the things that are acceptable and these are not acceptable. And as much as we appreciate diversity in opinions, there are some ways of looking at the world that we don't necessarily agree with and that we aren't going to co-sign and that have no place here.
Right. And I think it also, like you mentioned, takes a degree of responsibility within the institution itself to stick by that answer. Because I know that there have been different organizations and different institutions of higher ed who make that statement. And then when they receive pushback from a handful of individuals, end up reverting what they had originally abided by. Yeah. So to be more clear, an example would be there was an organization that focused on, it was a graduate school actually for education, so Graduate School of Education. And part of their education requirements were essentially to learn about social justice, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the arguments from a handful of students was that was oppressive in and of itself, because it was making students think in one way about the world. So trying to essentially coerce students into thinking or seeing the world in one specific way. Yeah. Right? Now, as higher ed professionals, we know that diversity is a good thing. Yes. Right? And that institution also thought diversity was a great thing, but because of the pushback, they ended up taking that out of their graduation requirements and out of their like website content, essentially.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like another form of oppression in and of itself, to not being able to stand by supporting equity and inclusion, right? Reaffirming that is the position that we're taking on as an institution, and then when there's an instance of pushback, stepping away from it.
Yeah, and it's not to say that I don't think that people should not. I think it should be defended, right? I think you can explain kind of your rationale for why you're doing it, but it also means sometimes people don't have to agree with it.
Right.
Right. Like I realize like there's some things that you just do because you have to do those things, right? And that's just kind of the way things are, right? And so I don't know, like what happened to being able to say, I understand your pushback, I understand your resistance to it. This is the intention behind this. This is why we're doing this, because we think it moves us in the right direction. And if you don't like it, it's been really nice having you here. Maybe there's another place that would be a better fit.
Right.
And I'm sure there'll be another place that would be a better fit. But the other thing that it's hard for me to understand with that is this idea that talking about these things or having open dialogue about these things is somehow like forcing individuals to like accept it, or like not even accept it, because that's not really the right word, but the idea of having that graduation requirement, somehow that in and of itself is oppressive, right? That you are somehow now a victim because you're being asked to engage in this thing. That we're saying, we understand that the world and the dynamics of the world are changing. We are doing this so that we can put out individuals who are better able to work in that ever-changing world, right? That we can say that as an institution. And that, I don't know, like it's weird that you get to kind of push back on that. And so the MCOD, for those of you not familiar with this, multicultural organizational development model. And it's Kathy O'Beer, Jamie Washington, the group that they're a part of. I think they're the ones who created this. And one of the stages, it escapes me which one, but one of the stages of that organizational development model says that diversity and multiculturalism, it's okay as long as it's talked about in a certain way. And it's as long as it is talked about in a way that makes the dominant culture feel comfortable. And so it's that, right? So we want those things, like when we talk about like most institutions, as long as you're doing those things in ways that like make people feel happy and feel good, it's okay. As long as it's in a way that's not threatening to the dominant culture, or I won't even say dominant culture, to the status quo, it's okay. But the minute we begin like pivoting from that, that's where it becomes problematic. And I think you can even look at that scale and say, all right, so now we're going to move from the friendly, happy stuff to maybe there's stuff that makes us slightly uncomfortable, but the focus is still on people of color, right? So now we're just talking about like, ooh, these things are bad to people of color. And so then you have organizations where that's okay because it's still focused on people of color. And so Sean Harper, actually, he makes his statement that, all of you, University of Missouri, 78% white. You are not going to change the culture there. You are not going to make it a more welcoming climate until what you are doing addresses the 78%.
Right.
And so if you look at any institution, you ultimately end up having to get to a point where the vast majority of the people there, your programming and your work has to be, it's got to reach them. And it's got to reach them in a way that's more than just about making them feel good, more than just about making them slightly uncomfortable because they feel bad about what's happening to like people of color, people in marginalized groups, let's say, but really about like how they also are impacted by that. And I think when you can begin to get programming, training, those types of things that are going to make people uncomfortable, but it's
is catered to that demographic, I think then at that point you begin to see kind of an organizational shift. Right. You'll see that kind of climate change that people are striving for.
Mm-hmm.
But I think kind of to go to your point a little bit earlier, the issue is that when you begin doing those things, you get some pushback, and then institutions will oftentimes revert.
Right.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like, as an institution or as professionals within an institution, I get how it could also be uncomfortable to receive the pushback.
Yeah.
I understand that.
I mean, I get hate mail all the time. I don't care, but also I don't like getting hate mail.
Right.
Like, I don't like looking at the flash on my phone and someone calling, like, saying a bunch of dumb stuff. Like, I don't appreciate that. Like, I don't, it's to the point where, like, if I don't recognize the person who's calling, like, I won't answer my phone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, think about this. Like, the way in which I do maybe I shouldn't say that, but the way I do my work changes because that's a real life thing that I actually have to deal with. I don't know how many other people. I know that there are other people who deal with that,
mm-hmm.
but I don't know how many other people in our institution intentionally will not answer the phone if they don't recognize a number because it could be somebody calling to leave them like a nasty message.
Right.
Or the fact that I have to sit and have a conversation with the advocates who work in our center
mm-hmm.
about what do you do when someone calls and they're, cursing at you, or someone calls and they're threatening you, or someone calls and, like, I don't know how many people have that experience. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no. You were saying, like, those types of conversations that we have to have with our advocates, but it even goes further. Like, we have to have conversations with our student employees, or really anyone who does collaboration work with us, or representational type work with us, who people see as someone from our department, right? As to whether they want to be associated with something that we're doing, right? So, like, when our students are creating programming and I look over what it is that they've put together, I will literally ask questions like, are you sure you want to ask that question?
Yeah.
Are you sure you're ready for that response? How will you deal with that response if it does occur, right? So thinking about all these other, like, these possible responses that what we might be getting from the community. Because as an individual, I'm okay with getting those responses. It's something that I've...
par for the course.
Right, exactly. But as students, I don't want them to feel like they have to also be okay with getting those responses. So I want to acknowledge that those responses occur and make sure that they're comfortable with them.
So just because it's uncomfortable and just because we don't necessarily like dealing with it, that doesn't mean that we should stop, right?
There was something else you were going to say before I cut you off, though.
I know.
No, we were talking about, because I was talking about answering my phone.
Well, when you were talking about answering your phone, I was thinking about not necessarily answering my phone, because don't really answer my phone.
Oh, yeah.
Because most of the work I'll do on my cell phone.
Yeah.
And it's really only people that I, like, speak with on a regular basis, right? Everything else I do through email. But I do that also specifically because I don't want to get those, like, those phone calls and have to actually entertain them. Yeah. Right? So if it's in an email, I can forward it off to, like, public safety or, other departments that deal with, like, equity inclusion, that deal with that sort of stuff. But when you mentioned that about your phone, I thought about the videos.
Oh, God, yeah.
And for those of you that are listening, the Whiteness History Month videos. Yeah. So I thought about those videos and me being on those videos and, like, having...
That was a conversation we had.
Yeah, having to, like, read the comments on those videos. Yeah. And then at a certain point deciding, like, I'm not going to actually read the comments on those videos. But originally I was reading the comments on the videos to see what people's responses were, right? So how could we make this better? Mm-hmm. But then it got to the point where the comments weren't even a discussion. They were just threatening. Yeah. In a sense. Like, one of them that I remember very clearly was a fella essentially saying that he wished I was in front of him so he could John Cena me. So it's like, okay, so
those who watch WWE would get that.
Right. So I'm like, okay, so now it's not even a conversation, it's not even a discussion about the content in it.
Yeah.
You just literally hate me because I'm saying something that makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's why I don't debate people. That's just my stance. I don't debate people because I don't care about changing your mind. And so and I'm saying that to say it's frustrating when you have conversations with people who their mind is kind of made up. Mm-hmm. And so what I mean by that is they're not actually responding to what you're saying. They're responding to how they feel about what they think you were saying. So it's almost like with those particular videos, and I'll broaden this out, a lot of the work that we do, it's not necessarily the specific message that we're trying to get across or what we're saying, because I think you're catering the message to that person. So it could be understood. But if you have this wall up and you feel like I represent the other side, then you're responding just to the other side and not necessarily what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And so I'm saying that to say, I have no interest in attempting to debate someone like that because, as Black Jesus would said, your mind's not right and your heart's not open. My Aaron Magruder fans will know what I mean by that. But your mind has to be right and your heart has to be open in order to have a constructive dialogue, right? And so it means that if you're responding to what I say, that's different. We can have a conversation. We can have a dialogue. But if I'm saying one thing and then you're responding to something different, we're not having the same conversation. Right. So, and that's one of the things I found often in the videos was that, and I didn't even read the comments, right? I'm talking about just the hate email that we would get, or the phone calls that we would get. It was other things that were out there that, you hear. But it was you're responding to what you think my position is. You're responding to your discomfort. You're not actually responding to what specifically someone is saying or what they're intending to say.
Right.
Yeah. And that, maybe it's a topic for another day, but it makes me think about the whole, the protests going on right now with the national anthem. I think about that because recently something happened at ECU, East Carolina, mm-hmm. Where some members of the marching band have also protested, and then there's been this crazy response, right? There's been some people who were very, very supportive, but these kids were also spat upon. People threw stuff at them. There's one of the employees who's now they are talking about exercising their Second Amendment right and bringing it, walking around campus with a gun. So far, this person is only walking around with a holster, but it's there's this response to the action and to what people think the position is, not necessarily to the actual message itself. But again, maybe that's another topic for another day.
So to me, it's just another reminder of how, and again, this is me saying as someone who works in higher ed, who does believe in higher ed, but who also can understand that just because you believe in something and that you value something, it doesn't mean that it's perfect.
Yes.
Right? And so to me, just reciting the Pledge of Allegiance every day, to me, that's not perfect, because that's not actually understanding what the Pledge of Allegiance was, what it is, what it was created for. Yeah. What's the critical thought behind its even existence, right? And so it's just another reminder of how in higher ed, oftentimes we tend to bring our students in and fill them with information, but not actually ask them to engage in the content. Yeah. Just to take it in.
And I would say that I like the idea of being able to, whether it's live in a society or work at an institution, where we can be honest and we can acknowledge that something may not be perfect for everyone.
Right.
Right. For you, it might be perfect. That's great. But just because it's perfect for you doesn't necessarily mean it's perfect for everyone. And so we can acknowledge that it's not perfect for everyone, and we can be critical of that thing, and we can still love it. We can still have more goodwill towards it than bad will towards it.
Mm-hmm.
But this kind of like all or nothing approach, I don't know if I find it dangerous.
Oh yeah,
like
very much
unblind
so.
loyalty, right? Unquestioning, unflinching loyalty, right? That you know, we just accept this and we don't actually critically think about what does this actually mean? And are we saying something that we believe and that we think sounds good, but are we actually asking whether or not it works?
Right.
For everyone that we're saying it's supposed to work for.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea about the national anthem, I think is very much that. If there's a question that I can get people, that I would encourage people to even think about, it's that, because I think that's what I take away from Kaepernick and him kind of being one of the ones who started this whole thing off, was their lyrics are things that are being said. And I think he is very much questioning, are we actually living that? And it doesn't mean that we are not perfect. It doesn't even mean I necessarily agree with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even that is the difference, is that whether I agree with him or I don't agree with him, I'm looking at what he's actually attempting to say. And I can say, all right, I'm attempting to understand that.
Right.
As opposed to just saying, you're doing this thing, I don't rock with you, you're bad. Right. And so I appreciate when I feel like I'm in an environment where that can take place.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're also in an environment where we have those daily reminders where we can't always do that. So it looks like it's time to get out of here. Before we do, I want to go over a few announcements. PCC is going to be hosting a guest lecturer, Dr. Sarah Goldrick Robb. Dr. Robb is going to be here October the 18th. From 6:30 to 7:30 in the MAHB auditorium. Dr. Robb's going to be talking about her new book, Paying the Price, which looks at financial aid and charting a new course for college affordability. So that is going to be, again, October the 18th from 6:30 to 7:30 in the MAHB auditorium. I think that's actually going to be really good. I think I said this before. She's not just talking about the problem of increased cost of higher education. She's also talking about solutions and charting the course. So I think that's going to be really, really interesting, really good. And I'm encouraging all the students that I work with to attend it.
Okay, and so I have one more announcement for everyone. If you haven't already seen them, we have some banners around campus that feature the Latinx and Hispanic community and different folks that have made significant contributions to U.S. society. So right now, this week, they are in the Student Services Building in the first floor. So if you get a chance, please feel free to go there and read the different bios, read about the contributions made to our society. And oftentimes they're contributions that we have no idea that people of color have made, but they're really important contributions. So take a look at those.
One other announcement, PCC Cascade Multicultural Center tonight with the Blazers. That is going to be Tuesday, October 25th. The home opener for the Portland Trail Blazers. They'll be taking on the Utah Jazz. We are selling tickets for that particular game. Tickets are $22, 300 level, but they're really good seats. If you want to purchase those tickets, definitely check out our website. Come to the Multicultural Center. Check out our Facebook page. We'll have a link. And a portion of each ticket sold is actually going to go towards fundraising efforts to students who are looking to attend the alternative spring break trip. So, this is Luke Givens.
And this is Elizabeth Guzman Arroyo.
Saying, so what if it's true?